I'm going to talk about the job interview and the 3 critical questions that you need to have answered before you step into the interview. So are you ready? Here are those questions. Before I tell you the questions, I just want to say that I'm not going to talk a lot about interpersonal issues or social issues or issues of etiquette, maybe difficult questions. I'm only going to focus today on the 3 questions I think you have to have prepared ahead of time. And those are the following. Why are you applying for this job? Do you know a lot about the company and how this position that you're applying for fits in it? And finally, what can you contribute to the job or position? These are 3 questions you have to have crystal clear answers for before you go into, or actually 4 questions, aren't they? Before you go into the job. So part 2 has 2 questions to it. So let's look at each of these questions one by one. And why is this important? It's important because unfortunately, a lot of people in this period of the coronavirus, have lost their job or have become underemployed, and they will soon need to find, or you will soon need to find a new job or a different job or a job. And so this hopefully will be able to help you get ahead of the competition. By really preparing well, you can put yourself in a better position than the others who are applying for these jobs. So let's take a look at the first question and my thoughts. Why are you applying for this job? Now, during the period of the COVID crisis, it might be acceptable to say that I need a job or that I'm unemployed, but in general, it's not a good look. It doesn't make a very good impression if you tell the interviewer that you need a job or that you're unemployed or that you were fired from your last job. So these are things you probably want to avoid stating directly. It's obvious you're there because you want a new position or a position, but you want to create the best possible impression, and these answers don't create that. Now, if there's ever a time when this might be acceptable, to be honest with them, it's during the period of the COVID crisis when millions of people, unfortunately, have lost their jobs. So this is perhaps the most acceptable moment, but in general, you want to be very careful about this. But since we're on the topic of fired, you've been fired, just a few synonyms and vocabulary for those of us who are interested in sort of the COVID vocabulary. You've been fired. These are the 3 very most popular terms that are used these days. I've been furloughed. If you've been furloughed, it means you're no longer working. You're no longer paid, but the company is holding your position in the hopes that there will be an economic turnaround. So you've been furloughed means you're not working at the moment and you're not being paid by the company, but there might be a chance that you're rehired later if there's an economic rebound. I've been laid off, that's fired. I've been laid off is more US, and I've been made redundant is a UK term, British term. And then we have all sorts of informal terms. I've listed 5 that probably aren't appropriate during this period. I've been axed. Notice they're all adjectives or these predicate adjectives. I've been axed. I've been canned. I've been given a pink slip. I've been let go. And I've been sacked. To be sacked is to be fired. All right. Please write your questions below in the question box. I will be sure to answer those questions at the end. Now, what can you say? I think it's more acceptable, more appropriate to focus on the new challenges and new skills that you're looking to acquire. So I'm looking for new challenges and opportunities. Perhaps the position you were at had plateaued. If it plateaus, it levels out. So there are no more opportunities to grow. Or I feel my skills could be better utilized. These are more positive spins on why you're looking for a job. And ones that I suggest you sort of look to provide an interesting answer. And your situation, every person's situation in a job interview is different. So tailor these answers to your specific situation. Let's look at the second question. Do I know a lot about the company? And do I know how this position fits within it? These are two critical questions, especially if the position is an important position, a managerial position, something that requires you to oversee other people. You want to know how your department or your future department or your area fits into the bigger picture of the company. And so what are some of the things or questions you can ask yourself to prepare properly for these sets of questions? Know as much as possible about the company. How has COVID-19 affected the business? This is going to be a relevant question for the next 1, 2, or 3 years. Companies are greatly affected. This is not a short-term issue. This is a short to medium-term issue. So how has COVID-19 affected the business? You need to understand this very clearly. And you also need to understand in relation to that, what is the core business? The core is the central business. Oftentimes companies have several different businesses that make money for them. They generate revenue for the company, but there's one that makes the most, or it's called the core business. Maybe it was the original business, but it's generally the one that people identify with the company, and so we understand that as the core business. Now, is your position within that core business, or is it one of the satellite businesses? A satellite business is one of these offshoots or secondary aspects of the business. You want to know where your position fits into the overall scheme of the company, because it also gives you an idea of how to approach the interview. And you need to know very well about the company you're applying for. I'm going to suggest that you study the company and the position you're applying for as hard as you did, or harder than you did exams in university. And if you didn't study very much at university, then forget that advice. You need to study it thoroughly. Thoroughly means in great detail. The more you know, the more you will understand and connect with the interviewer. Let's look at preparation part 2, which is also important. Know about the vacancy. The vacancy is the job that's open. That's the vacancy, the opening. Oftentimes you'll see this word also in hotels. Older 1 or 2 or 3-star hotels might have a sign in the window that says vacancies. That means there are rooms in the hotel or motel available to rent for that evening. So you've got to know about the vacancy. Is it a new position or is it a replacement? Did someone leave or get fired? Or are they creating a new position? This is a very different dynamic. If it's a new position, this might suggest the company's growing. If it's an existing position, then you want to know a little bit, if possible, about the last person, why they were let go. Or this is where you have to be a little bit creative in your homework. You can't necessarily ask in the interview about the last person, but you would like to find out, if possible, why that person left. What was the problem, or the circumstances surrounding their departure. Departure is to leave. All right. How does this position, as I mentioned before, fit into the department, and how does this department or area fit into or relate to the core business? These are important questions in order to calibrate. Calibrate is to fix. to calibrate your answers appropriately. If you don't know anything about the company or you know very little about the company you're applying for, the interviewer assumes you aren't taking the job seriously. They assume you know almost as much about it as they do. Now, that's not a fair assumption, but you actually should set that as your standard for understanding. Research the position. The more you know, the more you can tailor your answers to more appropriately. This is a really important aspect, the research aspect of the interview. And finally, what can you contribute to the job? This is perhaps the most important moment of the job interview. People aren't interested in what you want necessarily. You're coming to them and asking for a job, and not exactly. Obviously, there's a mutual interest, but everyone's selfish. You, as an interviewer, you want an interviewee. You're being interviewed. You want to know how much money I'm going to make and what are my conditions. But they want to know what you can offer them, and I think that's what you should set out to answer first. If they like those answers, then you can talk about what interests you, what's important for you. But I think initially you have to talk about what's most important for them. So you have to identify, number one, the company needs and match them with your skills. This takes some research. What is it about this position? What skills are critical to be successful in this position? And then you match those skills with your skill set or your talents or your abilities. And that's when you start to show value for the company. How can you improve or benefit the company? This is something here that you want to address very clearly. You can say things like, my experience in this area will benefit this position directly for the following reasons. Or you want to state how you can benefit the company. Let me give you a few examples. A very common job, important, interesting, is a flight attendant. Now, these aren't the only two aspects of being a flight attendant, but being helpful, this quality of being helpful, and the quality of being cheerful and friendly. These are two personality traits. They're different, but they're two personality traits that are really important to succeeding or being successful in a flight attendant interview, in addition to being tall. So you've got to be tall, I think. So here's an example. I was voted miscongenial. Miscongenial, if you're congenial, you're pleasant. You're a pleasant person to be around. I was voted miscongenial in my school. I'm certain that passengers will enjoy the in-flight service I provide them because I will do it with a pleasant and natural smile. And people will see that demeanor, that kind, pleasant demeanor. So what you want to do is highlight your skills with the most critical skills of the job. So these are things you have to plan ahead of the interview. Ask yourself, what are the 3 critical skills needed for this job? And then match your skills, your experiences, your accomplishments with those 3 skills that they're looking for. And one more example, civil engineer. Let's say you're a civil engineer. This is a professional position that's open. You have your experience on the left, which is from your studies, your internships. Internships are unpaid work, and then jobs. Jobs are your job experience. Now, you've got to match this with company needs. So if the company is building bridges and roads, but not doing energy systems, this is all part of a civil engineer. You don't want to focus on energy systems, dams, or any sort of electrical sort of projects that you were working on, because that doesn't interest the company. The company builds roads and bridges. So you want to highlight in your sort of experience in your studies, in your internships, and in your jobs, what you have done with roads and bridges, and you want to highlight those during the interview. All right, I want to just conclude, and then we're going to answer questions. The conclusion, a few ideas that I have here. You give better interviews when you understand a lot about the company you are applying or interviewing with. You give better interviews if you become knowledgeable about the company. Number 2, show value for the company. The more value you show them, the better your chances are of getting a job. And finally, study the company, its history and most recent performance as you would an exam. Take it very seriously. Come determined to be the most prepared candidate for the interview. And if you do all of these things, if you address these 3 questions essentially, these aren't the only questions, obviously. There are other important or interesting questions, but these are fundamental questions that all interviews you will need to sort of have answers to. And so if you can prepare these well, you stand a very good chance of competing for this job, especially if your skills match what they're looking for. Let's look at the questions. Plateau, I mentioned earlier. Plateau, if you plateau, that means you level out. You no longer are growing, you plateau. All right. All right, any questions related to job interviews, I will answer. If you have other questions, then you can ask those in a direct message. Someone's asked about a CV, how to write a good CV. That's a separate issue that's super important, but one that we don't have time to address now. So I'm just talking about the interview, but how to write a good CV it's a very important question and related. This is an interesting one, and I'm sure we'll have different opinions on this. How should you approach the interviewer if you don't know the answer to the question? Well, I think it depends on how important the question is to the job. If it's a question that you should know an answer to, then this is a problem. If it's one that is not central to the job, but maybe part of the pre-interview discussions or post-interview discussions, I think you can freely admit that you don't have an opinion or an answer. But if it's one that you should have done your homework on, that's a more serious issue. How to write a good cover letter is also important and relevant, but unfortunately not for this live. We should talk about that though soon. I will save the live and I will put this live on YouTube. I'm uploading the live to YouTube right after this. So you can, if you feel more comfortable watching it on YouTube, you can do that. Civil, what does civil mean? Someone asks, what does civil mean? Civil means dealing with society, dealing with the society. So roads and bridges are part of civil engineering as opposed to electrical engineering or other engineering positions. Let me take a look at other questions. Someone says flight attendant position is only for females. I don't think that's true. I think about 15 to 20, 25% of flight attendants are now male. So I'm not sure that's a female only occupation. Now, this is a good question. Here we start to get into the ethical issues of questions. What if they ask you if you were fired? I never encourage lying. I don't think you want to lie in an interview, because if you're caught lying, you're almost certainly not going to get the job. It depends on the circumstances surrounding your being let go. For example, in COVID, technically people are getting fired, but it's not because of your performance, obviously. It's because there's no business. So, if it's a situation like that, I think it's an easy answer. You can say that, well, the economic conditions of 2020 meant that we just didn't have enough business. And you can leave it very general without going into the details of how you got fired. I don't think they need to know all the details. And I don't think they're going to ask you. Most international Western companies will not ask details about the firing, and I'm not even sure they're allowed to do that. All right. Can I make a question about university entrance exams, university questions? I certainly can do that. All right. Thank you very much, Banana. All right. Someone's asked about the most important thing in the interview. I don't think there's one most important thing. It will depend on the interviewer, on what is most important. Each person has their own sort of thing they're looking for in the position. All right. I'm looking for another question. I'm not finding. All right, someone's asked about this. This is an interesting question. How to describe the previous experience and answer as to why you left the position. Well, it depends obviously on why you left, but as I suggested in the PowerPoint, I left, or I'm looking for a new position because I want to explore opportunities that provide new challenges for me, that take advantage of the skill set that I have to offer. I feel that I was underutilized in the current position, and that's why I'm here today. I feel this position more suits me more, and is compatible with the skills and abilities that I possess. So these are things you can do. So you can turn it around into something positive for the company that you're applying to. All right. Okay, someone has asked how to answer the question about changing your career. I've just provided a sample answer for that. This is a very good question. How can I have sort of self-confidence in an interview? First of all, being prepared. If you're very prepared, that's the first thing. Second thing is just go in and be honest and natural. You can be yourself, and because that's who you want to portray anyway. That's the person they're going to see every day. So you want to sort of be yourself. I think the more prepared you are, the more relaxed you're probably going to be. Although interviews are always a bit nerve-wracking. It's not easy. It's hard to be relaxed. So if you're nervous, you're like most people. So that's not a problem. Okay. Yes, you can take a screenshot of this presentation. Okay. I'm looking for any final questions. Thank you, Bogdan. All right, I think we're finished. I can't see. If you have any other specific questions, you can let me know and you can ask it. Okay, one final question. Where do you see yourself in 3 years? Now, this is why knowing a lot about the company and where they have been recently and where their focus is huge in answering the question, where do you see yourself in 3 years? I think you can, I think you want to show whatever sort of, if you're motivated and you want to grow, obviously you want to share that. You'd like to be in a higher position that's challenging, but you also want to tailor your answer, to fit your answer and align it with where the direction of the company. If the company's heading in this direction, you obviously would like to give an answer that somehow suggests you know where the company's headed. So for an example, if you know the company is moving away from passenger, let's say it's an airline and they're moving away from passenger flights to more cargo flights. They're going to do more shipping because COVID has created problems. You can say that I'm interested in transitioning into a management position within logistics in the next 3 years because I know this company is going to need greater logistics capacity than they currently have as they transition to cargo shipping. So any sort of thing that shows how you understand the direction of the company, and then of course fit in your goals within that, is the best answer I would recommend. All right. I hope this helps. Thank you very much for your attention. And if I didn't answer your question, feel free to direct message me. Have a great night, a great evening, or a great afternoon. Bye-bye.